The cold didn't just bite, it burned. Barefoot on frozen concrete, Darlene Whitaker, 52, clutched her thin cardigan tighter around her chest as the door slammed behind her. "Don't come back until you learn respect," her husband muttered from inside. Then the lock clicked. And just like that, after 29 years of marriage, she was outside, alone, except for the small trembling body pressed against her ankle. Her puppy. "Shoo, it's okay, baby," she whispered, though her voice shook more than the dog's. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The cold wrapped around her instantly, but what made her chest tighten first wasn't the temperature. It was the silence, the kind that follows something final, something that doesn't take itself back, because she had heard that tone before, she had seen that look before, but this felt different. This felt like a line had been crossed that couldn't be undone. And for a moment, she just stood there staring at the door as if her body hadn't fully caught up to what had happened, her mind replaying the last few seconds inside. The argument, the shift in his voice, the way his hand had tightened around her arm before pushing her out. And then slowly reality settled in, not all at once, but in layers. First in her feet, as the frozen concrete sent sharp shocks through her skin, then in her fingers as they tightened around the thin fabric of her cardigan that offered no real warmth, and then deeper, more dangerous, in the subtle change in her breathing, that familiar uneven rhythm. She had learned to recognize instantly, because it never came without warning, never came without that small shift that told her she needed to act quickly, needed to stay calm, needed to reach for the inhaler she always kept close. And for a split second her hand moved automatically toward her pocket before stopping, hovering, realizing what her mind hadn't fully processed yet, that it wasn't there, that she had stepped out without it, or more accurately, she had been forced out without it, and that realization didn't hit like panic at first, it hit like disbelief, like something that didn't quite make sense, because she never forgot it, never left it behind, not even for a second, and yet tonight, in the chaos of the moment, it had been left inside, behind a locked door, with a man who had just chosen not to open it. She turned back quickly, knocking on the door with more urgency now, her voice breaking as she called out, "Greg, please, just my inhaler. I just need my inhaler," trying to keep her breathing steady as she spoke, but already feeling the strain, already feeling that tightening grow stronger, wrapping around her chest like something pulling inward. And for a moment she waited, listening, hoping, holding on to the possibility that he would respond, that he would open the door, that he would realize what he had done and fix it before it went too far, but nothing came, not a sound, not a movement, not even the faint shift of footsteps behind the door, and that silence was louder than anything he could have said, because it told her this wasn't an accident, this wasn't something he was reconsidering, this was a decision, and that truth settled heavily inside her, just as her breathing grew more uneven, each inhale becoming shorter, less effective, her body trying to compensate, trying to pull in more air than it could manage, and beside her Milo shifted, no longer just trembling but alert, his small body stiffening as he watched her closely, his head tilting slightly, his focus locked on her face, on her breathing, on the subtle changes that most people would miss, but he had learned to notice, because this wasn't new to him. He had seen this before, had watched her reach for that inhaler, had connected the sound of her breathing to the relief that followed, had built an understanding in his own way, quietly, consistently, while Greg had dismissed it, ignored it, brushed it off as nothing, and now as Darlene bent forward slightly, her hand instinctively reaching again for something that wasn't there, her breaths coming faster, shallower, her chest tightening further as the cold air made everything worse. Milo didn't panic. He didn't freeze. He focused. He moved suddenly, bolting away from her with a speed that startled her even in her weakened state, disappearing into the darkness along the side of the house as she tried to call out after him, but couldn't get the words out, her voice catching as her body forced her down to her knees, the cold ground hitting her skin but barely registering as the lack of air became the only thing that mattered. Her hands pressing into the snow as her vision began to blur at the edges, her breathing now shallow, uneven, every inhale a struggle that didn't give her enough, and somewhere in the distance she could hear her own heartbeat, loud, uneven, echoing in her ears as her thoughts began to scatter, slow, break apart, because this wasn't just discomfort anymore. This was her body shutting down, her lungs failing to do the one thing they were supposed to do. And as that realization settled in, something inside her shifted, not panic, not even fear exactly, but a kind of clarity she had avoided for years, because lying there in the snow, unable to breathe, she understood something she had spent a long time trying not to see, that this moment didn't start tonight. It didn't begin with the argument or the door or the cold. It had been building slowly, quietly, over years of being dismissed, overlooked, controlled in ways that were easy to excuse in small moments, but impossible to ignore when everything finally came together like this. And as her body weakened further, her head lowering slightly, her strength fading, the world narrowing into darkness, Milo was already moving, already inside, having slipped through the loose panel in the side fence he had squeezed through before, his small body navigating the narrow space with urgency as he made his way toward the back of the house where the door had been left slightly open earlier that evening, pushing through it with effort, slipping inside, and immediately heading toward the hallway, not wandering, not hesitating, but moving, with purpose toward the small wooden shelf where the inhaler sat, exactly where it always was, because he had seen it there again and again, had watched her reach for it, had connected it to the moments her breathing changed, and now, driven by that memory, he grabbed it, struggling for a second to get a proper hold, adjusting his grip until he could carry it, then turning quickly and racing back the way he came, slipping through the door, through the fence, back into the cold where Darlene now lay barely conscious, her body slowing, her breathing dangerously shallow, until suddenly he was there again, dropping the inhaler beside her hand, nudging it toward her with urgency. Even through the haze, she saw it, recognized it. And in that moment, everything shifted, because this wasn't random, this wasn't luck, this was something that had been building quietly over time, something formed through repetition, through observation, through the silent understanding of a small creature who had paid attention when it mattered most. And with what little strength she had left, she grabbed it, pressing it to her lips, inhaling deeply, once, then again, her body reacting instantly. As the medication began to work, the relief hitting her in waves, harsh and overwhelming at first but real, undeniably real, air returning to her lungs as her chest expanded again, her body jolting as oxygen rushed back in, and she collapsed forward, clutching Milo tightly as tears streamed down her face, her entire body shaking, not just from the cold, but from how close she had come to losing everything. And inside the house, behind the door he had locked, Greg stood frozen, because he had heard something, a faint sound, enough to make him glance toward the window, enough to make him look outside, and what he saw stopped him completely, because there she was, on the ground, gasping, and beside her the dog he had mocked, the dog he had dismissed, holding the one thing that had just saved her life. And for the first time that night, the certainty in his expression broke, replaced by something else, something he wasn't used to feeling, because what he was looking at wasn't just a moment, it was the consequence of a choice he had made, a line he had crossed without thinking about where it might lead. And now that reality was right in front of him, impossible to ignore, impossible to take back. Darlene didn't go back inside that house. Not that night. Not when the cold finally settled into something bearable. Not when her breathing steadied. Not even when the door eventually opened. Because by then something inside her had already changed in a way that couldn't be undone. Something that made it impossible to step back into a space where her life had just been treated as something disposable. And in the days that followed, she didn't explain what happened, didn't minimize it, didn't soften it into something easier to accept, because the truth didn't need softening. It had already shown itself clearly enough, and that truth was simple. Love is not supposed to feel like something you have to survive. It is not supposed to leave you outside in the cold fighting for your life, while someone who claims to care about you chooses not to open the door, and no amount of time, no history, no shared years can justify staying in a place where your safety is treated like it doesn't matter. And maybe that is the lesson someone listening to this needs to hear, that the signs you keep brushing aside are often the ones trying to protect you. That preparation is not paranoia when your peace is at risk, and that your life, your breath, Your existence should never depend on someone who has already shown you they are willing to take it for granted. Because sometimes the moment that feels like the end is actually the moment everything becomes clear, the moment you realize that survival is not something you should have to earn in love, and that walking away is not weakness. It is the beginning of finally choosing yourself. Before you go, tell me honestly, what would you have done in her place? Have you ever ignored warning signs like this, or seen someone else go through it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that remind you of your worth. Thanks for listening.